Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. Today I'm joined by Neale to discuss the key lineup and injury news ahead of Gameweek 33. Neale, welcome. How are you?
I'm very good, Joe. Yeah, not quite as busy as a normal Friday because we've only got 12 teams to cover, so a lot easier for me. But we have got the Friday night deadline, of course, so that's
Of course.
makes this video all the more pressing. Yeah.
And yes, I just want to remind people as well that we have our regular breakfast club tomorrow. So watch out for another video and podcast then. That'll be at our usual 11:15 time. Even though the deadline is tonight and even though the team news tomorrow will be coming out at 2 o'clock, tomorrow's one's a bit different. We're going to be focusing on some more wildcard drafts. So that's of interest to those wildcarding and also those that just want to get some good transfers in from game weeks 34 onwards. I believe we're going to be joined by FPL champion Simon March as well. So I know I'm sure I speak for you as well. I'll certainly be looking and no doubt copying his team there. So, but now to the business at hand. Game week 33 team news. Deadline tonight. We're going to try and get this podcast version out. If you're listening before the deadline, it's worked. We have got it out. Let's start with Liverpool. They face a trip to Southampton. What has Klopp been saying ahead of this fixture?
Yeah, well, this very much was ahead of this fixture because this was 2 days ago. He gave his press conference on Wednesday. Liverpool's in action, of course, tonight against Everton. Positive on the Virgil van Dijk front. He was pictured after the last weekend's game with an ice pack around his ankle. He was sort of wincing through the final stages of that match. I think was when he produced that superlative bit of defending when Moussa Sissoko was throwing goal. He slightly injured himself there, but he sounds fine. Klopp said he was okay and that he's trained normally without any problem. This was Wednesday, it has to be said, but we haven't heard anything negative since. So it does sound like he's going to be fit to feature.
Sounds good.
Now we did have one piece of reportage which didn't come from the club itself. I think this stemmed from a Telegraph article last night, which suggests Joe Gomez is going to be back in the squad tonight. Now he's been long sidelined, I think about 4 months since he I'm not sure it was a fractured leg or something like that. Was kept out for much longer than expected. We didn't anticipate him being involved on Friday, but it does sound like he's going to be travelling with the Liverpool squad. Whether that's in the 18 remains to be seen, but I would very much doubt whether he'd be thrown straight in for a start. So I probably expect to see him as a substitute at best, but sounds like he's back in anyway and threatening starts at both centre-half and right-back going forward, I think. So
okay, so
one to monitor.
Potential rotation. Obviously, Liverpool have a few important matches coming up, still in the Champions League as well. And obviously, they've got to win every game they play in the Premier League as well. So there is going to need to be a bit of rotation there. But looking at Southampton, whichever Liverpool defender plays, there's a very good chance of a clean sheet. I was looking through their list and have they got any strikers left? Yeah, how is Southampton geared up for this?
Well, they won't be able to call on the services of Danny Ings anyway because he's ineligible. He's obviously on loan from Liverpool and he can't play against his parent club. They do have Shane Long back, but that doesn't exactly help in the goal scoring department. No. He's a willing runner, but that's about all he is. He's recovered from a groin injury. He's been back in training, and Hassan Huttel said yesterday that he's an option. So it sounds like he might possibly come in for Ings. Although Charlie Austin's another alternative, and they could even play Armstrong. But I would expect to see Nathan Redmond up front, whatever they play. The only other injury doubt they had was Yannick Vestergaard, who wasn't available last weekend. He is back in training as well, so he may come into contention. And Hassan Huttel was talking about the various formations he could play. He played a 4-2-2 last weekend, which was his go-to system in Germany, but he's mostly played with a 3-man central defence since he arrived, and I wouldn't be surprised if he went back to that, given that it's Liverpool who are the opposition.
Yeah, because that can obviously move to a back five quite quickly.
Yeah.
They're going to need that. I personally think that Southampton, as they did with Chelsea, are going to set themselves up so that Liverpool can't score. I know most teams should do that, but I'm not sure they're going to be setting themselves up to score much. And I think that's the way. So this is why I'm a bit nervous about my Liverpool assets. I'm not sure they're going to do as well, but I don't know. But Southampton certainly in great form at the moment, and the new management has certainly worked really. Real change around there. Let's move on to Chelsea. They play last. West Ham visit them. I mentioned them and I mentioned Liverpool at the start because they've got the key captaincy candidates that we'll be looking at as well. I understand Sarri has just finished his press conference and he's been talking a little bit about some of his young English players. So what's Sarri been saying?
That's right, yeah. I haven't seen it all the way through. I've seen large chunks of it on Sky Sports News and elsewhere. I'll fully transcribe that later on. But the questions on Loftus-Cheek and Hudson-Odoi, unsurprisingly, who both started in midweek against Brighton, both played very well. And as is always the case, press conference is dominated by questions over whether they're going to start again, given another chance in the Premier League. Sarri was pretty non-committal, as you much expect. Praised both players, but also said that he's got the game against Slavia Prague on Thursday in mind as well. So that's 3 days after Chelsea play West Ham. So I think he was perhaps laying the ground for a possible rotation with those two players, especially in mind. I think Loftus-Cheek and Hudson-Odoi. He mentioned that Loftus-Cheek's back needs monitoring. He's got this long-term chronic issue with his back. So I would not be surprised if those two made way for someone like Willian and Kovacic or Barkley in midfield. But he did suggest that there would be changes anyway, which is not what you want to hear if you've got someone like Hazard. I mean, I don't necessarily think that he will get benched, but he says that they've played 50 matches already this season and they've got to be thinking about the other games ahead and that. So you might see people like Rudiger coming back into the team. And
I think Rudiger would be on the Scoutcast this week. I made him my differential pick for the week, and I feel that's an easy win because I think they'll get a clean sheet, and he's under 5% own, and he'll definitely play. I think because he missed the last game. David Luiz owner, I'm not quite so sure about that. Hope for the best. You would imagine Azpilicueta's going to play. He always does, and he left the pitch early as well.
He did. That's right. Yeah.
So that would indicate he's been preserved.
His first,
I think Hazard will play. I think he's had his rest. I don't think he needs a lot of rest as well. And
I think so too.
Unlike last time, our last team news, Sarri was specifically saying about players being tired as well, and he hasn't really said that. He was talking about international players, and he hasn't really said that this time around. So. I'm gonna just put the armband on Hazard and hope for the best. I think with that one, Higuain and Giroud. I don't know if he mentioned anything about which he favours. You would imagine if he's got eyes and a brain, he favours Giroud. But you never know.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, he did mention that Higuain's going to be very important in the season running. As you would expect, backing a player who's not in great form, he's never going to come out and criticise him. Higuain said this week he wants to stay at Chelsea beyond the season. I doubt that, but who knows in that regard. Giroud certainly impressed, but it would not shock me to see Higuain coming back in for this one.
Especially if he sees Prague as the key game during the week. I don't know much about Prague. I'm taking that to mean they're not that good. And I probably would have heard about them if they'd have been, like a Barcelona or Real Madrid. I hope for the best there. I think you're right there. I think that's good analysis of that, of combining that threat of rotation with talking about those English players, because he sounds like he's laying the groundwork for that. Let's move on to Leicester. They face already relegated Huddersfield. So before we come to Huddersfield, how are Leicester shaping up? Because I know in particular their midfielders, a lot of interest in them, and also Jamie Vardy for the captaincy as well. So how are Leicester shaping up?
That's right, yeah, all good on that front. Very, very quiet on the injury news. They've got Albrighton and Almaty still out. Albrighton's actually not too far away from a return, so he might come and threaten the right wing position when he's back.
Okay.
But everybody's fit. This was yesterday, so obviously there's the chance that something's happened in the interim, but Rodgers was very upbeat about his squad depth. I was mentioning this in the team news section. I think since he's arrived, 9 players have played all the games under Rodgers.
Okay.
So he's not really one for rotating. And the 10th was Maguire, who would have played if he hadn't been suspended. So I think we can probably expect to see the usual names in that 4-1-4-1 formation. So Maddison, Barnes, Vardy, Tielemans, people like that. And then probably Maguire, who's now back from his ban, to come in at centre half as well.
In place of Wes Morgan, no doubt.
Goal scoring Wes Morgan, yeah. But I don't think Rodgers will be judging him on his ability to find the back of the net rather than to keep him out at the other end. So yeah, I think Maguire would probably come in for Morgan.
Okay. What about Huddersfield as well? Sometimes when a team gets relegated, it's a time to kind of start looking ahead to the next tier of football they're going down to. And sometimes younger players can come in. Sometimes loan players don't really get much of a look in. So what's the? Is any hints about how Huddersfield might be lining up?
Not really. I mean, they're a bit of a mess, really, in terms of injury situation. And one report I did ask Jan Seward if he would be experimenting between now and the end of the season, and he said he doesn't like the word experimentation. So yeah, it remains to be seen. But they've got plenty of people on the sidelines for this, or doubts anyway. So Diakabi's still out, but they've got flags over Billen, Matty Daly, Dupotra, Dehaney, Congolo and Benza. Lots of people who aren't certain to play. They do have the Danish trio back as well. Well, Billen's one of those 3 players, but Lossell, Zanka and Billen weren't included in the matchday squad last weekend because they'd been away with Denmark. And Seward said he wanted to work with the players he had over the international break, so that's why they weren't involved.
So Hamer could get another start in goal?
He could do, yeah. But I mean, as he said, like Lossell, the only reason he wasn't included was because he'd been away with Denmark.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say if Hamer really impressed last weekend, but I don't suppose he did enough either way to lose his shirt or keep it. So I wonder if perhaps see what's perhaps looking ahead to next season, thinking about players who are likely to stay and play in the championship and maybe blooding some of them. So, like, for example, Punchin's back this weekend. He was ineligible to play against Palace, but I wouldn't expect him to get much of a look in between now and the end of the season because he's not next year.
That is quite usual. I love the journalist who asked him if he was going to experiment. That's a really passive-aggressive way of saying, any chance you're actually going to play well? And he clearly doesn't like that. Okay, now I mentioned them as well because people considering captain Vardy, we want to be assessing, how rubbish Huddersfield are going to be, whether they're going to be experimenting, whether they're going to have youngsters in defence and come out a bit more. So that's why I asked that question. But it sounds like same old Huddersfield there. So if you're going to captain Vardy, just go ahead with that. Looking at Arsenal next, they go to Everton. As we discussed on the Scoutcast, it's a tricky one to call. Arsenal aren't as good away as they are at home, but they are still a good team. Everton are a weird one. Absolutely tons of clean sheets recently, but they can get hammered as well. So what's the situation particularly with the Arsenal lineup? Because I know players like Lacazette and Ramsey in particular who impressed against Newcastle. A lot of people are looking at them perhaps as a kind of 1 week punt, or indeed for the season running.
Yeah, that was a very odd game on Monday night because I saw a stat that it was one of the worst games of the past 16 years in terms of actual shots on goal. I think it was 10 shots in total. That was more down to Newcastle's approach than Arsenal. Well, Ramsey is a slight doubt, but only very slight. It sounds like he's going to be all right. He came off with I think it was a groin problem on Monday night. But it's just a minor injury and he's been in training. So they're going to assess him, but I think he stands a good chance of at least being involved. It's up to Emery, of course, whether he will pick him. Xhaka, not so much. It sounds like he's more of a doubt. He wasn't in full training. And they had a yellow flag over Koscielny as well, who missed out against Newcastle, but who sounds like he's back in contention. And I think he makes them a better defensive unit than when Mustafi's playing, who's very error-prone and, liable to just dive in and make a stupid slide tackle. But yeah, those are the 3 injury doubts as well as the long-term ones. And now I should say that Aubameyang He was benched last Monday for the third time in 5 Premier League matches, which is, a bit worrying if you look towards him for this weekend. Now, Emery did say on Monday night after that game in his press conference that Aubameyang had been ill in the preceding days, and that influenced his thinking. Okay. So he could come back in for this game, perhaps at the expense of Iwobi or something like that.
Yeah, they play Europa League. Am I right? It's next week.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Thursday night. Yeah.
So that's possibly going to be in his thinking as well. But I'm looking at past team sheets. I think if you're going to back Lacazette, I think you should feel confident he's going to get a start. Ramsey, that's 50-50. Because there's also Mkhitaryan as well, who could come in there and provide that role.
There's not much of a look in recently, Mkhitaryan, and I was just saying in the team news there as well that Ozil hasn't started an away game in this calendar year, so he's not entirely certain of a start either, even though he played very well last week.
And what about Everton? How are they looking? In particular, has anything been said about Jordan Pickford? I know that he's been involved in some off the field issues, and so anything been said there?
Yeah, full disclosure on this. I normally watch this on YouTube. They stream it live. There was some monumental audio problems with our do news, but I will hopefully get a better copy of that video later on this afternoon, and I'll transcribe that. So as far as I'm aware, nothing to report on the Everton front.
Okay.
But we'll I'll keep you posted on that. Check on the site and on Twitter later on.
Okay.
I did hear talk of Richarlison, possibly linked with a move away and that, but it was I think it's all quiet on the Toffees front anyway.
Okay, all quiet on the Toffees front. There's some ad people for working for a sweet company, thinking wishing they thought of that. Looking at the other fixtures taking place, we haven't mentioned Bournemouth v Burnley, and we haven't mentioned Newcastle against Palace. So let's have a look at Bournemouth Burnley first. Any particular injury or lineup news from either of those two teams?
Yes, there is. Yeah, start with Bournemouth. They are still doubtful over whether Adam Smith's going to be back. They've also got a doubt over Charlie Daniels as well. So that's 2 left back options there. Now we saw Begovic come in for Artur Boruc last weekend, and Howe didn't mention anything this time. But after that against Leicester, he said that Begovic had trained well and deserved a start. Now he said the exact same thing about Boruc, the way he got his run of games. So yeah, we might expect Begovic to stay in because Boruc was between the posts for the next 9 games after that. So I sense that Begovic might be given another chance before the end of the season.
Okay.
So I think he might have the upper hand. But apart from that, the main players from a fantasy perspective, Wilson, King, Brooks, Fraser, they sound like they're all right. There was nothing reported by Howe, which doesn't necessarily mean there's anything not wrong with it, of course.
No, that's fine. And also, we know Bournemouth, they can spring a rotation surprise on us.
Yeah.
But I think obviously this week you haven't got much on the bench. You've got a Bournemouth asset, play them. And hope, particularly if it's a goalkeeper. Burnley, how are they looking?
Very quiet, all fit apart from Peter Crouch, who's got an appendix. He's had an appendix operation, so all fit.
Okay, doke. And Newcastle against Palace. Any news from either of those two?
Yeah, great for Palace. If you're an owner of Wan-Bissaka, Zaha, people like that, they're all fine apart from a long-term victim, Mamadou Sakho. He's still out. Newcastle, not so much. They've got Fabian Schär back from suspension and a head injury. He had simultaneous problems there, but they do have fresh doubts over Yedlin, Hayden, and Diarmi. I know this is just broken in the last half an hour.
Okay.
Benitez was the last of the managers to give his press conference. They're minor doubts, I should say that. But yeah, that's something to monitor. I think no one's probably going to have Diarmi. Hayden might be a budget midfielder some people have on their bench, and Yedlin as well is a semi-popular route into that Newcastle back line.
I mean, any news like that is quite good if you've got a Palace attacking asset, because Newcastle have actually been pretty good. Their home defensive form recently has been really good. We noted it on the Scoutcast this week. But we also noted that Palace are currently the best away side in terms of goals scored over the last 4. So I expect them to go out on the attack, Newcastle to defend.
Yeah.
Well, that could be, yeah. So we're going to be paying close attention to that injury news there. And
I think also that
yeah.
right side of sort of away from team news, right side of Newcastle as a fan is the weakest side as well. Yedlin or Mankiw or whoever plays. I think Zaha's pretty good bet this weekend. I think for if he's playing on the left hand side
Yeah.
to exploit that.
Yeah, no, I think he's quite good. A lot of people are mentioning a whole bunch of strikers for game week 33, kind of risks and punts and things, and I haven't heard Zaha being mentioned much. And
No,
I think you're right there. I think he could be a good option. There are a number of teams not playing, involved in the FA Cup, and obviously their opponents as well. So, is there any particularly notable news? And I'm thinking particularly for those thinking ahead to game week 34 in mind. Any notable news from teams we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, well, we've just heard Guardiola's press conference. They're playing tomorrow in the FA Cup semi-final. Aguero is nearly fully fit, according to Guardiola. Okay. He's travelling with the squad, so if he's not involved, then he's very, very close, and you expect him to play in the Champions League thereafter. So I fully expect him to be back for game 34.
Okay.
Zinchenko's out for 10 to 12 days, so that's where will that take us? You probably miss game 34 in that sense then. So we might see. Well, who knows? You might even see Benjamin Mendy back, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Right. I think, I'm not sure actually, just looking back there, Joe, I'm not sure if we've covered West Ham yet, have we?
Sorry, yes. We're looking at how West Ham, we mentioned them briefly, but yeah, is there any other particular news there? I mean, I know Anderson was an injury doubt, but have we got any news there?
Yeah, so Anderson and Fredericks, I think the flags both come off of them in FPL. Pellegrini said this morning that they're both okay. Nasri's back in training as well. He could come in contention. Now I know which was flagged, I think, based on comments that Pellegrini made after that defeat against Everton, based on his knee. But there was no mention of any problem in his press conference. It was more about his form, about his attitude and things like that. There's nothing mentioned about his knee. So I think he's fine.
Okay.
To play. Not that he's a particularly attractive option at the moment with his form or that fixture away at Chelsea, but I think that brings us up to speed on the West Ham team news. Anyway.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks so much for that. Some positive news, some as usual, some bad news, and some I don't know what they mean by that type of news. But I think I feel confident with my picks at the moment, and I hope those listening and watching do too. But in the meantime, thanks so much, Neil, and good luck with the game week.
Yeah, speak to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.